Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the True North Report. News every Canadian needs to know. Today, we're going to be focused on a few different stories. The first one we're going to be talking about is how a Canadian senator has just revealed the location of nuclear weapons inside of Europe, U.S. nuclear weapons. We're going to talk a little bit about Justin Trudeau getting sued, and we're also going to be discussing the PPC because something just ended up happening with the People's Party of Canada that's quite big. The big news that I want to get to first, however, it seems that recently there was a document that was written by a Canadian senator for NATO, and this was Senator Day was the man's name. He ended up writing this report that was called "A New Era for Nuclear Deterrence, Modernization, Arms Control, and Allied Nuclear Forces," and this was ended up getting released in April. But then recently, some European news outlets came across the fact that in this report, Senator Day ended up revealing the location of six locations of U.S. nuclear weapons. So this sort of information is the type of thing that can be exploited by not just enemies, but even it can be exploited by people who are contending on the world stage, people who are not necessarily an enemy to America, but are trying to compete with them for power in a region or just on the world stage, Russia, China. And as allies, this is the sort of information you're supposed to keep quiet. It's the type of secrets that you're supposed to guard for each other as military allies. But Senator Day single-handedly destroyed any sort of credibility that Canada has in order to keep these secrets, these important secrets. So this is from the National Post, and it says, Canadian Senator's NATO report accidentally reveals location of U.S. nuclear weapons in Europe. The document does not attribute the information to any source. The final version of the report omits the specific references to where the bombs are stored. The final report may omit the references to where the bombs are located, but the point is that the damage is done because international news outlets have picked up on this, and they themselves have reported on this, which means that anybody can get this information. If you and I can find this information, then you're damn right that any other foreign government can get this information. Well, so as this goes on to say, a recently released and subsequently deleted document published by a NATO-affiliated body has sparked headlines in Europe with an apparent confirmation of a long-held open secret. U.S. nuclear weapons are being stored in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. This has been what's been going on, actually, since going back to the Cold War, because that was where NATO was actually originally formed. It was formed by 29 countries. It was formed by, I think it was 20 countries originally, and then 9 more signed on. Anyway, 29 countries today, but the real point was after World War II, there was the threat of the Soviets, and one thing that really scared a lot of people, especially in Europe, was the fact that the Soviets had gained so much territory in World War II, so much of the eastern countries in Europe, that all these countries came together, and it was supposed to be that way if the Soviet tried to invade one country, they would have to deal with all countries. So this would be Canada, America, Great Britain, France, many other European countries that would then decide that standing together is stronger than standing separately. So this was the point of NATO. And yes, it was quite clear that already going back decades, we knew that there were U.S. nuclear weapons inside of Europe. And I'm sure some people probably thought that these weapons got removed after the Cold War. Although I think anybody who really kind of understands military history, even somewhat, would know that these are not the type of things that they would remove from there. It's just, it is a deterrent for it is a deterrent for anybody who really wants to do an invasion of Europe. We are strategic and military allies to the U.S. As this goes on, a version of the document titled A New Era for Nuclear Deterrence, Modernization, Arms Control, and Allied Nuclear Forces was published in April. Written by a Canadian senator for the Defense and Security Committee of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, the report assessed the future of the organization's nuclear deterrence policy. But what would make news months later is a passing reference that appears to reveal the location of roughly 150 U.S. nuclear weapons being stored in Europe. According to a copy of the document published Tuesday by Belgian newspaper De Morgen, a section of the nuclear arsenal reads, quote, "These bombs are stored at 6 U.S. and European bases: Kleinbrogel in Belgium, Buchel in Germany, Aviano and Gedi Tor in Italy, Volkel in the Netherlands, and Incirlik in Turkey," end quote. So these are the type of information that, again, someone like Russia or China could use to their advantage. But even something that's more pressing right now, say Iran, since Iran and the U.S. are currently having a standoff over in the Gulf of Hormuz. Considering everything that's happened there over the last few weeks, and even what's happened recently, because the U.S. Navy just shot down a Iranian drone just in the last day or two, that tensions are rising. Now, I don't believe that this sort of situation would lead to a situation where nuclear weapons would be necessary, but these are the sort of deterrents that we have. And sort of just that reference that they make about Senator Day, it says, the report assesses the future of the organization's nuclear deterrence policy. Well, the nuclear deterrence policy can't be changed for the sole fact that even to today, that is still being used. When the nuclear bomb was created, we came to a point of no return, because as soon as one country had this technology, had this power, that sort of technology was going to be sought out by everybody else. Every single major military power in the world is going to be seeking out that technology, so that way they're not that far behind. We've all seen the photos and the videos that have come out from the drops that were done on Nagasaki, as an example. We saw what ended up happening in Japan and how effective these nuclear weapons are. So that would put America way up, way higher, on a different level than every other military. They could literally destroy a country without losing a single man. So the nuclear deterrence option, there is no going back from it, especially when we're at the point where we have now, where so many countries have nuclear weapons that can be used. It's the mutually assured destruction theory, that if you want to launch a nuke against me, then I'm going to launch a nuke against you and we'll die together. Unless somehow, some way, you are going to find every single country to dispose of nuclear weapons, then you need to still have that access to those weapons. Because until that ends up happening, which I don't believe will ever happen, then you need to be able to defend yourself against the worst possible attack that can come. So you can't change that. And even so, the fact that this technology existed, even if we managed to completely disarm all the major countries in the world, every country in the world, from nuclear weapons, you still have certain threats. Like, we know that ISIS was trying to acquire nuclear weapons. What about these radical terrorist groups that are trying to get their hands on nuclear weapons to do unspeakable damage? What do you think ISIS would do if they had access to those weapons? So we can never go back from the nuclear deterrence option. But as I move on, it says here, as a rule, neither the United States nor its European partners discuss the location of Washington's nuclear weapons on the continent. Quote, "We do not comment on the details of NATO's nuclear posture," end quote, said a NATO official speaking on the condition of anonymity in line with the organization's rules for talking to the media. Quote, "This is not an official NATO document," end quote, the official added, noting that it was written by members of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So it's not an official NATO document, but Senator Day should have known better, because this is the sort of thing that would come out publicly. There is no escaping from it. This is a huge breach of trust on Canada's part to not just the US, but all NATO allies. See, what makes multilateral military partnership effective is trust. Military allies, can only operate and share information with others if they trust each other. And by revealing this location, Senator Day has single-handedly broken a pact agreed upon by all 29 countries who signed on to NATO. And at the moment, one of the problems that NATO is having is the fact that the U.S. is the biggest contributor to NATO. And more and more U.S. citizens and U.S. military servicemen are already feeling like NATO isn't necessary for them. That doesn't mean they won't be military allies, but actually contributing to NATO because they make up the brunt of it. I think only right now the U.S. and the U.K. is actually meeting the requirements for NATO, because one of the requirements for NATO is that 2% of a country's GDP is spent on defense, spent on military defense. So the U.S. is taking up the brunt of this, while other countries, such as Canada, are not meeting the requirements. So the U.S. is saying, I don't think we need to be in the agreement. Many of them are feeling this way. Trump was very critical of a lot of NATO allies last year during the NATO summit, for those who ended up paying any attention to that. So this is another reason as to why they wouldn't want to be involved in this. And even worse than that, this is a good reason why they wouldn't want to share important information with Canada, important military information, if our politicians are then going to turn around and publish that to the entire world. You're not just publishing a public document to that just to NATO, but anybody can have access to that document. And if the information gets out like it did, that just destroys the trust that we have in each other. Now, what makes this situation even worse is the fact that when this was first released, all these different news sources were coming out and saying, like, for instance, the National Post article we just read. It said Canadian senators' NATO report accidentally revealed location of U.S. nuclear weapons in Europe. Well, what makes this situation worse is that while everyone was initially reporting, saying it was an accident, it turns out that that was not the case. It turns out that Senator Day intentionally released this information. He intentionally meant to tell the world and NATO where these nuclear weapons were being kept. This ended up getting released by Global News. So the first report by the National Post was on the 16th of July. This was on the 17th of July, and I'm recording this on the 18th of July. And it says here, exclusives, Senator says reports inclusion of U.S. nuclear weapons location in Europe, quote, not an accident, end quote. And it says here, just at the top, that's not highlighted, we'll just get into it. It says, Senator Joseph Day says a report he authored for the Defense and Security Committee of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly that reveals specific locations of American nuclear weapons in Europe was done intentionally. Quote, it was not an accident. We intended to communicate to our audience, which is the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, to give them information with respect to the issue of nuclear deterrence. I think it's very important people understand this was an honest attempt by the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, one of the committees, to inform the public and, more importantly, to inform the lawmakers and parliamentarians about what the current state of affairs is in relation to this important aspect of NATO in maintaining peace and security in the world, end quote. He told Global News in an interview from his home in Hampton, Brunswick. Quote, and to suggest that there was a mistake or to suggest that somehow we were leaking information that wasn't public information before is wrong, and it's more sensationalism and false reporting, end quote. So the senator is saying that this is public available information. No, it's not. It is not publicly available information because while it's impossible for the U.S. to keep the location of every single nuclear weapon that they have secret, it's quite clear that a number of them are. You can definitely Google search and find a number of information as to the locations, especially in the U.S., of where their nuclear weapons are stored. But do you think the U.S. is broadcasting where their weapons are internationally, where they're keeping their nuclear firearms? Of course they're not. This was not publicly available information, and even if people were aware, many of these countries, not NATO allies, but even foreign foreign governments and countries who are aware of the fact that Europe had nuclear weapons. Europe is a big continent. They don't know specifically where these weapons were located, but now they do. I mean, I have no doubt that these weapons have since are either been moved or in the process of been moved. But the chances are that this was publicly available information is, to me, slim to none. I mean, after this incident, why would the US or any NATO ally trust us with military secrets, trust our country and our government with these military secrets? How could they guarantee that they wouldn't be publicly released? In one fell swoop, Senator Day has done untold damage to Canada's reputation that is going to take years for us to repair on the world stage. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that this is what this man took upon himself to do, because he made a decision that not only affected our country, but affected the whole world, affected one of our closest military allies, and not just military allies, but our biggest trade partner. And really, we are descended from the British, and we have close ties with the British, but we have really close ties with the US, or we did at one point. And our relationship over the last 4 years has not been going well. Since Justin Trudeau came into office, but specifically since Donald Trump came into office. I mean, there was at least amongst the governments, they were getting along when it came to Trudeau and Obama. But there was always, sometimes there's tensions between the people of the two countries, but now Senator Day has taken upon himself to do irreparable damage to our relationship with the U.S. Damage that's going to take a long time to repair. So let's move on to our next story now. And the next story we're talking about has to do with Justin Trudeau, who is getting sued. So, switch over screens. There we go. So, senior woman manhandled by Trudeau security guards files lawsuit claiming $95,000 in compensation. And for those who don't remember, this ended up taking place last summer in Quebec, Sabotages, Quebec. And for those who don't remember, we got a video here of the situation that took place. I'm sure you will remember because enough people became aware of this. Go.
Êtes-vous tolérant avec les Québécois de souche? Répondez-moi, vous non plus, vous n'avez pas votre place au Québec. Avez-vous compris? Vous n'avez pas votre place au Québec.
Je suis fier Québécois, madame. Je suis fier Québécois.
So that was the original situation where where this woman, Diane Blaine, ended up coming up to ask Trudeau about the question when it came to the illegal border crossers and how much money it's cost Quebec and how much is going to be refunded to them by the federal government. And after that situation ended up happening, she ended up, after that situation ended up happening, Trudeau's security team, his goons really, swooped in, who were plainclothes RCMP officer. They grabbed her by the arm and dragged her out, which we can probably see playing here. So they dragged her out of the crowd. They ended up holding her for questioning, and they were asking her all kinds of questions, asking her to show ID, even though all she was doing was asking a question to the Prime Minister, and they had no real reason to be holding her against her will. So, and situation took place over a course of the next few minutes. That was all caught on camera. And because of the situation that ended up happening, Diane Blaine is suing Justin Trudeau. Because a lot of people, one thing that they had a problem with specifically was the fact that for asking a question such as this, she is now being interrogated and stopped by the RCMP. That is an extremely dangerous precedent when it comes to freedom of expression and expressing your own opinion and your political beliefs inside of Canada. This is the type of thing that you hear going on in dictatorships, Middle Eastern dictatorships, and I'm not trying to suggest that as of now, Canada is a dictatorship, but we've been seeing a crackdown that's been happening on freedom of expression. I want to use the term freedom of speech, but unfortunately, freedom of speech is not something that's truly ever existed here in Canada. It never has. But the fact that she's being questioned for this is shocking. And we can see here that what you're looking at right now is the Quebec Superior Court. We're seeing how this is Diane Blaine, and she has made the case against Justin Trudeau. And what she's suing for is she's looking for compensation for the following injuries: corporal injury, $5,000, psychological damage, stress, and loss of quality enjoyment of life, $15,000, defamation and damage to her reputation, $30,000, infringing her right to free expression and opinion, and infringing her right to be treated without discrimination, $15,000, for a total of $95,000. Now, I don't think she's going to get the full settlement. I don't see, unless she has some sort of physical injury that escapes me that I didn't hear about, because as far in the video, she only shows that the guard bruised her. I don't see how she's going to get compensation for corporal injury for worth $5,000. She could get at least some of the settlement with some of these other things with the evidence that we have available. Defamation and damage to her reputation. Well, after this incident took place, there was a lot of media reporting on her, and, from what we heard, there was some things that could definitely make her enemies in the public. I think maybe it says later on in here, soon after Blaine was After the incident, reports circulated Diane Blaine was involved with far-right nationalist group, Storm Alliance. I don't know anything about the Storm Alliance, so I can't confirm what type of group it is. Whether as they put it's a quote-unquote far-right nationalist group. So I can't confirm or deny that. But the point is that she's ends up getting reported on in the media simply because she's trying to ask a question. And of course, they could add as the defamation, infringing on her rights to free expression and opinion. I think they very could do that because of the way she was treated after the fact. And maybe falling into the defamation and damages is this psychological damage, stress, and loss of quality enjoyment of life. I don't think she'll get the full settlement. I don't think she'll get the full amount from each thing that she's requesting, like $15,000, $30,000, and another $15,000. She won't get the full settlement on that, but she could definitely, I think, at least win some of this settlement as well. We'll end up seeing what takes place. I find it a little bit ironic that Justin Trudeau, not too long ago, just a month or two ago, was threatening to sue Andrew Scheer for statements that he made, not in the House of Commons where they have immunity, but also outside. And he was threatening to sue Andrew Scheer, who said, bring it on. And then he ended up backing down from the whole situation. He never, ever went through with his lawsuit. And now he's being sued for his conduct. So we'll end up seeing what ends up coming out of this. But I want to move on to our third story. And this one we're talking about the People's Party of Canada. I actually was only planning to talk about two stories when I came across this story just before I started recording. An entire PPC riding board resigns, blaming racist supporters. In a massive shock to Mad Max Bernier, the entire board of the PPC in Elmwood Transcona riding resigned. In a Facebook post published yesterday, the board unilaterally withdrew their participation in Bernier's People's Party. And as it says here, it says, Dear Max, we are a group of early supporters, mostly libertarian and small C conservatives, inspired by your leadership campaign. It was refreshing to finally see a politician with the courage to stand up for his principles. We were very excited to see your stance on corporate welfare, supply management, and crony capitalism. The move to begin reform on the income tax system to benefit the average Canadian was inspiring. We were interested in seeing your final plans on firearm legislation and equalization payment. We lost a few volunteers to the slow and shaky start, and we wasted time dealing with a number of organizational issues. Slow deployment of membership lists, absentees, regional organizers, as well as a sudden change in design and technical direction be the example. All of those could be seen as normal problems faced by a new party, but they have cost local organizers regardless. The biggest problem we face locally, though, are our own supporters. Racists, bigots, anti-Semites, and conspiracy theorists have large presence in the public conversation surrounding the People's Party of Canada. Many of these PPC supporters would deny freedoms to Canadians and close our physical and economic borders. Many more spread disinformation and distrust online via their personal and sometimes official party channels. None of these are the things that we would have expected you to stand beside during the leadership campaign. We are appalled to see it encourages a wink and a nod. Most of our once enthusiastic members and volunteers have distanced themselves from the party now that tone has shifted away from strong ideals and prudent policy toward conspiracy and Twitter trolling for outrage. In Elwood, Transcona, we lost both our financial agent and our only prospective candidate to the justifiable fear of a tainted reputation. We are often told by like-minded people that they feel abandoned by this new direction and disconcerted by the many of the vocal PPC supporters they see online. We are excited for a principled alternative in Canadian politics, but the party is moving in a direction we cannot follow in good conscience. So that was them resigning from their post, which is quite interesting. The thing is that when it comes to the PPC, when Maxime Bernier announced that he was going to be splitting from the Conservative Party and making his own party, I was excited about the potential that was there, because I've always found that there is not a single party out there, not a single major party out there, or major or important politician that have been talking about the real problems that face Canadians. And at least in the past, I've seen that from Maxime Bernier. Or I should say, I did see that at one point, Maxime Bernier. One of the big ones for me has to do with fiat currency and the Bank of Canada. See, when I've looked into it, it's quite clear that one of the reasons that Canada's debt is so great, and when I say it's great, it's astronomical. I don't have the graph pulled up in front of me, but you go look up Canada's debt from Confederation all the way up to, I think it's about 2016, or 2017 or so. In 1975, I believe it was, Canada's debt began skyrocketing, and one of the reasons was in 1974, there were changes made. Before this ended up taking place, before 1974, Canada would borrow its money from the Bank of Canada, which could be done at little to no interest rates. But then, in 1974, things changed, and that was under the direction of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. It now allowed governments, both federal, provincial, and municipal, to borrow from private banks who charge astronomical interest rates. And this is where most of our debt comes from. If you look at what we're paying off towards our debt every single year, about 75% of that is because of interest rates, is the money we owe because of interest rates. And Maxime Bernier, if you go back to 2008, 2009 on his YouTube channel, you see him putting out videos where he's talking about the Bank of Canada. You see videos of him on committees, in parliamentary committees, where he's grilling the governors of the Bank of Canada about the practices that are going on. But this has all changed. He doesn't talk about these things anymore. That's one of the big ones for me. So I really became disillusioned with the PPC. Now, I'm not sure if I completely agree with everything that this group ended up saying, the riding board, who have resigned, about absolutely everything. I think they're pointing out to some. They say racist, bigots, anti-Semites, and conspiracy theorists. Well, I think you could probably, in every single party, look at these people, show these people and how they exist: racist, bigots, anti-Semites, and conspiracy theorists. Although, to me, the biggest one that I really don't care about is this one about the conspiracy theorists, because you look at the origin of the word conspiracy theorist, it was coined by the CIA in order to try and slander anyone that was questioning CIA and the government and what they were doing. I don't see a problem in someone who's a conspiracy theorist who at least are backing up what they show with good evidence. But anyway, that's just a small one. And they do definitely point to examples where they're talking about racist, bigots, anti-Semites, that sort of thing. But it's quite shocking that this is what's come from the PPC, because this was, for a lot of Canadians, the PPC was supposed to be a new leaf in Canadian politics. It was supposed to be that party that was going to rise quickly to the top, and maybe, just maybe, from the 2019 election, would be a contender to actually get into office, take over, and change things from the inside out. Now, I also say as I've gotten older, even though it's just been since last year, it's been about a year since the PPC got started. Ever since then, I feel like I've grown up a little bit more and stopped trusting in politicians and political parties. So I don't really think that would be the case. I don't believe that they would actually be able to come out and change things. I think when you get into power, things you wanted to change, your priorities change simply because the powers that be won't allow you to really make the changes that you want. And one of them is the monetary system, why it's never going to change. I don't believe it's ever going to change. As George Carlin once said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. Politicians are just the puppets for the people inside of this big, who really control everything. So, as time went on, I didn't really see the PPC for what they are, and really, they have not had the great rise that was being advertised as they believed they were going to have. They thought they were going to come up, they were going to steal from the Conservative Party that right-wing conservative vote, but that has not been the case. If you've been paying attention to the polls, and I mean, I don't even trust the polls, really. I mean, you could just look back to what happened in the 2016 presidential election polls. They were like, many of these news sources and these professional pollsters were saying that Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in to win. That didn't end up happening. But I don't really trust the polls, but they have to be based at least somewhat in reality. And the point is right now the PPC is not polling very highly federally. You can probably look at some ridings where they're polling pretty well, but for the most part, it is not going over well. So I think that the damage is done to the PPC where for this election, it's quite, maybe they'll have someone that is voted into Parliament. Maybe they'll have a couple ones. We'll see if it's Maxime Bernier, because his pollings in boosts are not going very well. It will have to wait till October to see. But thank you all for tuning in. And before I go, I just want to once again, please ask people to go to my website, because I'm trying to get it off the ground as best I can. I know that the website is not exactly ideal. It's very roughly done. I haven't removed the Wix advertisement or everything. But again, you find all my articles, all my videos there, and I'm trying to at least build it up off the ground, and who knows, maybe become a legitimate news source someday, or at least a legitimate alternative news source someday. We'll end up seeing, yeah, if you can go to my website, share the videos, share the articles, I always greatly appreciate it. But thank you all for tuning into the True North Report, and this is news that every Canadian needs to know.